Uh, Actually, if you can see this setup, we did this all for you. Otherwise, we just used to sit on with the chairs and do our show in our Urdu language. But obviously, it's a very special day for us as you are with us. So we're very honored. Okay, so we'll be live, Faisal now. Are we live, Faisal? अच्छा जी शुरू करूं बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम आ गए हैं चार होशियार बहुत मजेदार शानदार बेहतरीन मूड माहौल और एनालिसिस लेके और इन चेहरों पे मुस्कुराहट और एक्साइटमेंट देख के यकीनन आप लोग सोच रहे होंगे क्या है आज का शो जरा अलग होगा सब दिनों से क्यों क्योंकि आज का शो होगा अंग्रेजी विच इंग्लिश में शो होने वाला है वाई बिकॉज because today we have someone very special on our show. Right now I'm mumbling because I'm very excited. Let me introduce you. And first of all, I want to say that we are very honored to have him over here on Char Hushiyar, and it's something like I'm out of words. So let me introduce you. Well, he is a sports journalist and great cricket analyst, and he also writes for ESPN Cricket Info. And by the way, I became his fan when I read his articles on ESPN Cricket Info. And he's also basically he's an Australian. He's an Australian writer, and he is also a documentary filmmaker. And currently, right now, he is running his YouTube channel with the name Good Areas with none other than Mr. Jarrod Kimber. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you guys?
Oh, absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Great. And once again, I want to thank you that you have, given us time, and we are honored. We are feeling honored, and we are very excited. And I hope when this shows end, you are going to like it, and we can do more shows in the future. So let me introduce you our team. Myself is Maz, Mohammed Maz. On my right is our Mr. Genius, who has actually, prepared all the questions over here. And on the left,
or the main brain of the Charusha.
The brain of the Charusha, you can say. Charusha, the name of our channel. And on our left is the guy who was in contact with you, and he deals with, all the technical things and all.
What about you? You didn't say what do you do?
And I am the one who runs the show. They don't accept this, but actually it's me who's running the show. So, where to start from? Well, we have. Where do we begin with? Well, we have prepared some questions, but as Pakistan England test match is going on, and today we are having you on the show. And luckily, after 1,000 days of Pakistan test cricket, we have a good day in test match. Oh, right now we have 6 England wickets down, and that's
what's your take on
what's
that?
your take on that?
I was supposed to be commentating India and New Zealand today for TalkSport. So I went in early in London. We were recording out of London, and so it was myself, John Norman, and Gareth Batty ended up watching, the first couple of sessions of New Zealand, of Pakistan England, because we didn't have anything else to do, right? So I watched a bit of it, and then because it's like you like I had to wake up at like 3 a.m. to go into the city to do all this stuff. And then when it rained, all my energy went. So when I came home, I was exhausted. So I think when I went to have a nap, England were in charge, right? They were, Ben Duckett was smacking runs. I think Crawley had gone out, but Pope was in. And that was the last time I looked at it. And I was like, maybe there was 76 for 1 or something, or maybe it was even more than that. I can't even remember. But I was thinking to myself,
from 221 to 2, they went to 225 for 6.
Yeah, so I think they only lost 1 wicket. Were they about 170 for 1 at one stage as well?
Exactly. Exactly.
Actually, that's when I went. I remember I was listening to a little bit of it, and then I was like, I can't be bothered. I'm gonna go and have a nap. And then when I woke up from my nap, it was like the test match had completely changed again, and it was like the world had changed, right? Pakistan had a good day, as you said. Like, well, what is happening here? So I wasn't expecting that at all. I kind of, on day one, I think England got out to 4-1 with the bookies, or 4s, I should say, with the bookies at one stage. And I was thinking that's probably a good time to bet on England, because generally what happens is they get out to really big odds, and then they get a bunch of wickets in a row. Then it evens off a little bit. It's the same with their batting. Their batting either comes with bunches of runs or bunches of wickets, right? There's no in between. And when I had my nap, I was thinking to myself, geez, England are massive favourites here. And then I woke up and Pakistan were favourites again. So that's the kind of test match you want to follow, yeah?
So that means Pakistan is still unpredictable.
I think we could say they're predictably unpredictable.
Predictably unpredictable.
But the big credit goes to, I think, Akif Javed, because he actually, told to the curator of the wicket that we should play on the same wicket.
He finally made them go to their strength, just dry the wicket and use the wicket which was used in the previous match, and use the spinners. But this uh, strategy will not work for long. This might work in Pakistan, but it will not work in other countries.
But not
Well,
outside
it might
Pakistan,
not.
obviously.
It might not work in this test match. They might still lose this test match, right? Like,
Exactly. Yes, this can happen.
I don't think it's a particularly easy pitch to get wickets on. Also, I think if England had batted first, I think they might have made 450 and Pakistan would have already been out of the game by now. So it's easy to say, oh, well, they dropped all these players and they're doing really well and they've reused this pitch and they're doing really well. They might still lose. And I don't think this is not the method you want for your cricket nation, right? Of like, maybe we can win test matches if we drop all of our best players and then we reuse the same pitch twice in a row. Like you don't want to rely on that sort of madness to be successful. But if I was a Pakistani fan, even if it's just the last 2 days, I would take the last 2 days because you had to go through that last test and everything went poorly. Of course, they're now massively in front in this game, and so if they end up losing this game as well, then the heartbreak goes through the roof, right?
Yeah. So are you pointing towards the Babar and Shaheen drop that they should not be dropped in the these two test matches? And then check your mic.
It's not so much that I don't have a problem with star players being dropped. There are issues when you drop star players, of course, but what I have a problem with is scapegoating your three most talented players when you've basically been crap for 10 test matches. Right?
Yes.
Like it wasn't them that suddenly made that. And it was a scapegoat move because you wouldn't have dropped all three at the same time. Right? What probably should have happened was, I think before the series, they should have said to Babar Azam, what do you think? We think you're getting back into the touch that we want you to be in, but I know this is a big series and everything else, but how about you go off and maybe don't play in the first test or make yourself available later on? Shaheen Afridi, they've got no one to blame but themselves. They bowled him into the ground. They bowled him when he was injured. They've kept him on the field when he's been injured before and everything else. And Naseem Shah just hasn't had enough cricket to develop, right? Like I've got no issues with the individual droppings of any of those players. But you don't drop your most talented batter in of this generation. And at one stage, a guy who looked like he was going to be up on that Yunus Khan, Javed Miandad level, you don't just drop him midway through a series. Like India would not do that. Australia would not do that. Ricky Ponting spent about 4 years not making any runs for Australia. The only time he made runs was when Pakistan dropped him and he made a double hundred, right? Like it's the only time he made runs for about 4 years. And what did Australia say? They said, it's Ricky Ponting. If he can work this out, we're not going to be able to replace him with like another Ricky Ponting, right? If you drop your most talented player and you bring in your seventh most talented player, the chances are over a long period of time, that seventh most talented player is not going to be better than the person you're doing. And I know he made 100. I wasn't completely on board with the way he made his 100 and the way he got. I'll be having nightmares about his dismissal for the rest of my time. Colin, I don't know what the hell he was thinking trying to play that shot before stumps. But it's regardless of that. That's not the issue. All right. There was always a chance that whoever came in for Babar Azam would make more runs than Babar Azam because he hasn't made any. Right. But the bigger issue is all the players now, every single player in that team thinks that at any stage they can be dropped because if you can drop Shaheen Afridi, Babar Azam, and Naseem Shah all together, there is no continuity. There is no professionalism there. That is not the way you want your team to have a look at. So if you look at, I think this was a study done in America, and it's quite commonly used in cricket now, which is the best teams generally have the most consistent setups, right?
Exactly.
Now,
that's the main flaw.
Yeah, and I would say that there is a flaw in that argument as well, because if you're really good, of course you're not going to change your coach or your captain or your quarterback or your point guard, right? Because you're already really good. So there is an element of that there. Don't get me wrong. But, I as an NBA fan watching, I think it was the Sacramento Kings had something like 7 coaches in 10 years, right? At a certain point, it's not the coaches, is it? It's the people appointing the coaches that are making the issues. And it's the same with Pakistan cricket. So, yes, there'll be a lot of people that'll be like, look, it's worked. And it's like, it has worked, but it's worked in a fluky way. That is not how Pakistan cricket is going. I know no fan ever wants to hear this. I don't care if Pakistan win this game or not, right? What I care about is they start making decisions so that they can consistently win over a long period of time, right? A one-off win where they come. I mean, we all know that, as I said before, with England comes with a lot of runs or a lot of wickets. Like, you're always a chance against this England side because of the way they play. They give the opposition a chance, and if you can capitalize that and everything else, that's more than fine. And all respect to the Pakistani players who've got themselves in front in this game. But let us remember, they were also in front in the last game after a couple of days.
But according to you, if Pakistani, you cannot blame the coaches right now. Who do you want to blame? The selectors, the PCB management, or the players, or the captain? You are not blaming Babar Azam.
I would like to add on the question. I heard your podcast with Shoaib Malik recently. You asked him a question, and I suppose you knew the answer, but still you asked the question. You asked him that how difficult is it for a professional player to deal with an amateur PCB? And you asked that question twice. Once he didn't hear it, and then he tried to dodge because he's in contract with PCB, so he can't talk clearly. But now I want you to tell the answer, which you already knew.
I know a few Pakistani players over my time as a journalist. You know, I've got some friends who are Pakistani players, and it's not just Pakistan players as well. Like I have friends who are Sri Lankan players and Bangladesh players and associate players, right? That are professionals and sometimes have to be in amateur situations. Women's cricket is a huge one for this. You know, we've just done a big article on Marizan Kapp that will come out on the website in a couple of days. When she was 14 years old, she was playing senior cricket, but she would get to the nets and the nets weren't set up and she would bowl to a stump on her own, right? And she didn't have a batting coach until she was like 27 or 28, right? So Marizan Kapp is good because she had to be professional in an amateur situation. And what I really want to show Malik to say is, yes, and we're talking about the top, 15 Pakistani players, right? Over the last 15 or 20 years, they've played county cricket. Yunus Khan played Sheffield Shield cricket, right? They've played in franchise leagues around the world. They've had responsibilities and, all these sorts of things that you would expect of professional players. So I've seen Shoaib Malik up close before. We never met until that podcast, but I've seen him up close when I've been working for other franchises and he's been in the same league, right? And I watch him and I go, I can see that's a professional. I understand what I'm looking for. I'm watching the way he's preparing and everything else. And that's a professional. And it's very hard to be on the franchise circuit and not be a professional because the coaches don't want to deal with you if you're an amateur and you just turn up and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, right? Because think about it, a lot of these franchise leagues, the players get there 2 days before, right? Like, if you have an amateur, it's the same with county cricket. County cricket doesn't usually go after the next most talented player. They look after someone who's a professional so that when they get there, they'll just look after themselves and the county can worry about all the domestic players, right? So I knew that Shoaib Malik was domestic, but I also know that the PCB is amateur, it's irrational, it's poorly run, it's short-sighted, it's political, it's all the things that you don't want if you're a professional athlete and your job is to go out there and try and do the best that you can do, right? If you've got all of those other things swirling around. So, when Babar Azam lost form, right? We did a video on that and we talked about the fact that he had all these different batting coaches and senior coaches. Who do you trust? Who do you talk to? Who do you have a relationship with, right? That is what professionalism, that's not what Roger Federer had, right? Roger Federer had like a team of people and he would occasionally move on and maybe try a new coach or a new physio or whatever and, change up his dietitians and all those sorts of things. But he made informed decisions based on the fact that he was trying to make the most out of Roger Federer, right? And that's what any American side or the top, football teams around the world, that's what they try and do. They don't always get it right, but that's what they try and do. The PCB doesn't do any of that, right? They just go from whim to whim to whim. They appointed a person as their coach who clearly didn't want to coach them because he didn't give up his other coaching job. Right?
Exactly.
He's just not in,
I believe,
he's just not that into you, right? Like, how much clearer do you need it to be? And so from an outsider, and I was working with Mickey Arthur when he was dealing with the PCB. So we were commentating a series together. And he was just like, how could I commit to that job knowing that in 6 months' time, if the chairman changes, I'm not going to be there?
Yeah, there's no job security.
Exactly. And I can tell you guys this. I don't know if it'll ever go anywhere, but I've had chats with the PCB before. They're like, great, you clearly get this. We'd like to bring you in and, look, help us with our analysis and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I've got no problem with doing that. But I have two issues. One, I would probably need to be paid up front because I don't trust that you'll pay me. And two, when I do something, I go all in. Right?
Okay.
If I'm going to do something, I go all in. If you guys screw me over and 4 months in, I'm not being used anymore, you are going to hear about it. And you're going to hear about it from a guy with a few 100,000 social media followers, quite a few of which are Pakistani, right? Okay. So you guys need to make a very clear decision because I will not sit in the corner like a normal analyst. I'm going to do this job and I'm going to attack it and try and make Pakistan cricket as successful as possible because I love Pakistan cricket, right? And I would love the opportunity to go in and work in that sort of environment. Right. And really shape an international cricket culture. I think it would be such an exciting thing to do. I briefly was involved in Scotland and it was so much more fun than working for a franchise. Right. However, when it comes down to it, we all know that even if I was offered the job, it would probably be at the last minute. I'd probably already have taken other work. Then I would get the job and 4 months in, they would change the coach, the chairman, the selectors, the captain, and everyone else. So even if I stayed, I would have to build new rapport with everyone who's left, right? How as a professional athlete, are you going to get the best out of yourself if you're in chaos? You cannot. And so we know how talented Pakistan is. We know how talented the players are. We know how talented their coaches could be and their selectors and their directors of cricket. Like there's not a talent drain in any of those things. But what there is an organizational and structural shit show, right? And that is the problem for Pakistan cricket. And so talent can occasionally overcome that. So if you told me in the next 10 years that Pakistan won another trophy and was runner-up in another trophy, I'd be like, okay, it doesn't look like it at the moment, but fine, I can believe that. But if you were to tell me that Pakistan cricket's about to go on a tear and be consistently good, I do not see how that is possible right at the moment. There just isn't the structure. And I can tell you all the other nations are getting so much more professional on a day-by-day basis. And Pakistan is sitting there coming up with new tournaments on a whim's notice, right? It's just
all these tournaments happening over here. Like in last 3 years, there were 4 PCB chairmen, Ramiz Raja and Najam Sethi, Zaka Ashraf, and now Mohsen Naqvi. So whatever you just told is like absolutely right. But what do you think out of these 4, who was the worst one? Who took the bad decisions?
See, I think that's where part of the problems come from. It doesn't matter to me who was the worst one, right? From a perfect example of this is, you want me to really tell you who's the worst chairman? I'm not going to tell you that based on like 2 months or 5 months or a year. I've got very strong opinions on, the chairmanship of N. Srinivasan and, Edwards and Clark in Australia and Clark in England and these sorts of people that have been in charge of, what's his name? Dave Cameron, the West Indies. I've got a lot of views on Dave Cameron, the West Indies chairman, right? How do you even have a view on someone who's come in and not, and made a couple of bold decisions and then disappears again, right? Like it's not even a real position at that point. And that's not how you build sporting culture, right? It's not how you build a strong, stable position for your team and your 2 teams, in the case of the women's side as well, to be successful. And so when you say who's the worst, like Ramiz Raja is publicly the worst because he made it all about himself. So, obviously the other guy picking Mickey Arthur wasn't ideal either.
Thanks for the answer.
Right? But he's the worst because
at least his intent was good.
I told him
I would go out on a limb here and say all 4 of them, their intent has been, no one has come in going, I wonder if I can ruin Pakistan cricket. Right? Right. And that's the same with, I hate so many of the chairmen in international cricket. Like Giles Clark and I, Giles Clark would probably spit if he saw me walk past him. Right. But I have no doubt in my mind that what Giles Clark thought he was doing was the best for English cricket. Right. Now, I would disagree with that. And I would say he was fundamentally flawed. And I certainly don't agree with the way he did it. The same with Rambo. Rambo didn't go into this going, I can probably take down a whole country here and I'll be remembered. Like, he wanted to be the savior of Pakistan cricket. But I think it's that complex. And your question, which is part of the issue, right? Of like, everyone is looking for someone to blame or someone to hero worship. right? And it's like, that is not what you should be looking for, right? What you should be looking for is just continuity and professionalism, right? And the last person that you had that brought any continuity and professionalism was Wazim Khan. He was basically chased out of the country, right? By the press and by Rambo, right?
By
Like,
Rambo. By
right?
Rambo as well. Yes.
And so what did you have there? Wazim Khan is a very, very what's the best way of putting it? He's an ambitious person. So he's currently the general manager, I want to say, the ICC. I'm sure he's got his eyes on far higher positions than that, right? And I could see how he could rub up some people the wrong way. And he was also an outsider, even though he's obviously of Pakistani heritage. He's an English cricket person, right? But let's just have a look at what he did. Without getting too Mussolini or anything on it, he made the trains run on time, right? That's what Pakistan cricket needs to do. That question that we had before, who do you blame? The captains, the selectors, whatever. I blame the system, right? And that is from, let's be honest, the Prime Minister on down. I blame the entire system for where Pakistan cricket has got. And in the old days, when talent was enough, I don't think it mattered as much because Pakistan had so much natural talent. Talent isn't enough anymore. I would say almost from, I don't know if you guys know the story about Matt Hayden going to India, but Matt Hayden wasn't making any runs for Australia. Everyone in Australia was treating Matt Hayden like, I'm trying to think, like he was Imam al-Haq. Actually, like he was worse than Imam al-Haq. Like people were openly mocking Matt Hayden as the biggest bust in Australian cricket, right?
Okay.
Matt Hayden calls up Cricket Australia and he goes, you've got a tour to India soon for India A. I'd like to go, for Australia A. I think it was that. It might have even been an under 25s tournament. It was something quite interesting. Anyway, he said, I want to go. That's one of my big issues. I think I've worked out the seam bowling stuff, but I need to work out spin because if I can't play spin, I'm never going to be able to be of any use to this team. And obviously, he grew up in Queensland where like they literally, spinners are illegal up there, right? So, he wasn't used to that kind of bowling. He goes off on this tour and he works out how to play spin. A couple of years later, he's back in the Australian team. He makes all those runs against India, and everyone's like, "Oh, Matthew Hayden, what a brilliant player of spin." That is when, for me, cricket changes, right? When you are starting to send players off for specific things that they can improve on and get better as a professional so that one day you might be able to use them again. That is a huge step forward. And it probably takes 20 years from there for it to happen all around the world, right? Like, other countries are still catching up to that method. But once Australia do that, look at what India A and India under 19s did under Rahul Dravid, right? Exactly the same kind of thing. Rahul Dravid.
Yeah, they were superb.
Yeah, he basically coached them and said, we are coaching you in a way so that you can play for the Indian team. We're not coaching you so you get better for cricket. This is the role that you're going to need to play in India, and we're going to do this. And we're going to take you here, and we're going to take you here, and we're going to give you advice, and we're going to keep a whole bunch of youthful players around and upskill you all so that when India needs you, we can call on you. Look at England. McCullum says, this is the kind of cricket we are going to play. Him and Ben Stokes tell everyone in county cricket, this is how we play cricket. You all know what you need to do if you want to play for England now. All right. Sorry if you don't fit into that. If you're a blocker or if you're an 80-mile-an-hour wobbly bowler, right? You're no longer in our use. This is what we are looking for. Everyone in English cricket knows what they're doing. And when a Lions tour happens, they will take players on Lions tours who don't even have much experience, but specifically because they know in a couple of years they're going to be touring that country again. And that spinner or that batter or that wicketkeeper might be at England level by that stage. That is what Pakistan is going up against. And Pakistan can't even decide what one of the 24 roles they want Mohammad Hafiz to do. How do you compete with that, right? Mohammad Hafiz has had more jobs, than I did in my teenage years. And I tell you what, I had a lot of jobs.
And one more name you are forgetting, Wahab Riaz.
I almost mentioned him as well. I don't know if I think Mohammad Hafiz has had one extra job than Wahab Riaz. But I haven't. We need a whiteboard here to put all their jobs up, but then we would run out of ink in the whiteboard pens.
So the real problem actually which Jarrod is pointing is like it's not inside the team, it's outside the team.
They are looking for quick fixes, especially in Test cricket. Quick fixes are not the solution. But the problem which you are referring to, the chairman changes and everything changes, the selection and coaching staff changes. But the real problem, if you start from the top, it triggers from the political interference. So it's a long way to go to get corrected.
Exactly. And it's, Pakistan's probably the most famous version of this, but Sri Lanka's having similar issues, right? And has for a long period of time as well. They're probably just of recent times, maybe not been quite as hectic as Pakistan. But if you go back in the last 10 years, I would say that Sri Lanka's been as hectic, if not more hectic than Pakistan. And look what happened to their cricket, right? We still know there's talented players playing in Sri Lanka, but they couldn't even get a T20 tournament up, right? They had a T20 tournament planned in 2012. It disappeared and they just never replaced it, right? And so a whole generation of Sri Lankan cricketers didn't develop in the same way that everyone else did because, as we talked about before, Shoaib Malik and Muhammad Hafiz and all these Wahab Riaz, those players played around the world in franchise cricket. Well, the Sri Lankans weren't playing in franchise cricket outside of a couple of key guys because no one knew who they were because there wasn't a domestic tournament to have a look at, right? So it isn't a Pakistan only issue. There are certainly other cricket boards that have their problems. The Australian, the Indian, and the English cricket boards have many other issues that they need to overcome as well. But when it comes to professional structures, I think those players know, for instance, I think the vast majority of cricketers in the world from a major board know that they're going to get paid on time, right? Pakistan cricket isn't broke. That's just a cash on hand issue, right? It is, how unprofessiontional can you be if you're not even paying your own players? Like, we're worried about Babar Azam being dropped. How about worrying about him paying his mortgage?
Babar Azam being there is a guy commenting that Babar is dropped because you pointed his mistake that your video is getting really viral. So you are the reason. Well, if you that's another issue.
He's the reason. That's why we won the Champions Trophy. He is the reason. He wrote the article after the first match.
Which article?
Now tell the story now. The story is like that. Pakistan lost the first match, and Cricket Info asked him to write the article. The first few lines were that, and I still laugh when I read those lines. The first few lines were that Pakistan turned up on the day and they didn't forget to wear the green. That's all the positives covered. They forget
Do you know what? I don't remember my articles very much, but I remember writing that one so clearly. I was just so pissed off with how unprofessional and lackluster they were in that game. And I know that was read by people in the Pakistan team, right? Like, and I think if I remember, the last line I wrote on that was playing Pakistan at the moment is like having a bye. And I think the follow-up line was something along the lines of, and at this moment, it looks like from this tournament, it will be bye Pakistan bye or something like that. But it was like,
and you ended the tournament, or after the semi-final, you wrote the article. It was fly Pakistan fly.
Yeah, exactly. So I bring it all back. I'm happy to reuse all my best material. But yeah, I grew up in Australia, obviously, and the first international cricket team that I kind of liked outside of Australia. In fact, if we're being really honest, I love Victorian cricket and then Pakistan cricket and then Australian cricket, probably third, if we're being deadly honest, in the order of my childhood. But, Pakistan cricket really opened me up. It's a big part of the reason I'm here now. Like it allowed me to see another culture and understand, like, Australian cricket is brilliant, obviously, but it's so one-dimensional. Like, I don't know if you guys know, but New Zealand cricketers always laugh at kind of how stupid Australian cricket is. So like, this is the only way we'll ever play. And in New Zealand, they're like, well, if you didn't just have really talented players, you'd have to learn and play other styles, but you don't have to. And so seeing Pakistan play, and Mushtaq Ahmed was a huge hero of mine, and Imran Khan and Wasim Akram and Inzi and all those sorts of those players as they came through really opened me up to overseas cricket. And from there, I got into sort of the Indian side, and eventually it would be Sri Lanka and all these, and New Zealand and all these different teams. But it comes through that, and so there is a fan element when I'm writing about Pakistan that I don't have. I'm not a fan of English cricket. I don't care all that much about English cricket, other than the fact that I live in England, right? I don't want it to disappear because that would really affect my job. But I don't care that much about England. I care about individual players and individual coaches and people I know. But Pakistan cricket, there is a part of me, and so when I see that game against India in that Champions Trophy, it was about as poor. And I remember it so clearly now. It was about as poor a performance as I've ever seen a major team play. And considering they won that tournament, it tells you how much was going wrong at that stage. But it's also, them winning that tournament is the worst thing for Pakistan, right? Because around that same period, and it might have been just after, I wrote a piece, I think it was for Dawn, I don't know. Does Dawn still exist? But back in those days,
Yeah.
Dawn used to
Yeah,
exist.
it does. It does.
Yeah, and so I wrote a piece for Dawn where I essentially said, it doesn't matter who the captain is, it doesn't matter who the selectors is, it doesn't matter who the coach is, right? That is all that is an issue for when you are getting things right. What matters for Pakistan at the moment is that every 15-year-old kid who is athletic and shows some talent in cricket learns how to field, learns how to throw, learns how to be in the right position, learns how to run between wickets, learns how to read a pitch, right? Because so many Pakistan players have a freak talent. Like I always think of Rahad Ali as this, right? Rahad Ali could bowl, 85 mile an hour. He was reasonably tall, left arm bowler. He got to international cricket based on that one skill set. He wasn't accurate. He couldn't really swing the ball all that much. When the ball stopped swinging, all he could do was bowl wide. He couldn't field. And when I say couldn't field, I don't mean necessarily that he was a terrible catcher and everything else, although he was. But if you watched him on the field like I did, he would not go in the direction of the ball. Like he wasn't following the path of the ball. And it wasn't. Muhammad Irfan is another guy I saw do that. I would watch them in the field.
You had a perfect example with Imran Tahir, how Pakistan cricket is.
Yep. So Imran Tahir is my favorite story in Pakistan cricket because the first time I saw him play was, I think it was 2008, and I was in England. He's playing for Hampshire. And when he caught the ball, or when he tried to catch the ball, I should say, it looked like a penguin trying to catch a ball. Like he had no physical dexterity. He looked like Phil Tufnell if Phil Tufnell had been drunk out on the cricket field. Like just horrendous fielding athleticism. He didn't understand what he was doing. And then 6, 7, you're watching him, the ball goes up in the air, he turns, he follows it, and he runs back with the flight, and he takes a perfect catch. And you're like, wait a minute. Imran Tahir can field now. And then over the years, he got better and better at fielding.
Better and better.
It's almost like South Africa were teaching him how to field when no one in Pakistan was. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You're going to find another Harris Ralph, right? Like Harris Ralph was like plucked out of nowhere, right? You're going to find Muhammad Harris type cricketers and Muhammad Irfan and all these sorts of players will continue to be developed by Pakistan because there's a huge passion for the game. It's a really interesting way that Pakistani cricketers develop in general. That's fine. The missing link is when they get to the top level, do they know how to run between the wickets correctly? Do they understand how to bowl cross seam, right? Have they been coached up correctly? In that podcast with Shoaib Malik, me and Shoaib, I think, would disagree with a lot of things. But listen to one of the things he said. We have to teach them how to eat. These are professional cricketers. How do they not know how to eat? They should have been taught at 15. The first time anyone saw them bowl at 80 miles an hour, it should have been like, great. Okay, so this is how you eat protein. This is what carbs are for. What do you like to eat? What kind of body type are you? Let's work through it. If you're a 26-year-old professional, Shoaib Malik should not be telling you how to eat, right?
This is what New Zealand does it.
They're not groomed.
Yeah,
They keep all the data and they teach
basically this is all goes towards the management, right? You are basically focusing on the management. There is the management flaw is making the Pakistan team downfall.
Do you want to know what the biggest issue is? And it goes back to something that we asked before. But you're right, it is the management. But it is specifically Wasim Akram that is the issue here. Right?
Okay.
Oh.
Wasim Akram.
You are saying
the secret is coming out now. Listen to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasim Akram basically goes from tape ball cricket to international cricket. Yeah?
Okay. Yes.
He can bat. He's a brilliant athlete, a natural athlete, I would say. He's not just left arm, but he's fast. He's not just fast and left arm, but he's accurate. He's not just fast, but left arm, but accurate, but he can swing it both ways. Most left arm bowlers can never swing the ball both ways. They don't even know how. It's not even part of what left armers learn. And yet Wasim Akram basically comes from holding a rubber ball in his hand to being one of the most complete left arm bowler in the history of the game, right? Alan Davidson maybe was slightly better, but Alan Davidson had one ball. He just bowled it perfectly. Wasim Akram has all these different skills that Alan Davidson doesn't have, right? And no one else does, right? Left arm bowlers have never had this before, right? There is this idea in Pakistan that you'll be continually be able to find Wasim Akrams, right? And we know that talent is out there. No one is denying that there isn't another Wasim Akram out there, right? But the idea that he's going to come into that system and be the freak athlete and to be the complete package is nonsense, right? Steve Smith I think we would all admit that Steve Smith is a freakish natural cricketer. If Steve Smith didn't play cricket, he probably would have been a great tennis player. He would have been a French Open type tennis player, like Leighton Hewitt. He would have been that sort of level of tennis player, right? Whether he becomes the greatest in the world or not, I don't know. But he would have been a professional athlete because we know he has incredible hand-eye coordination, and we know about everything else. But Steve Smith didn't fit in the Australian mold of cricketer, right? Australian mold of cricketer, you don't play across a line. You bang the ball down the field, right? The Australian mode of cricketers, generally, you don't have like a closed back face. It's all about having the open bat face because you don't want the top edge from the extra bounce to go through the slips, right? But because Steve Smith is a great athlete, because he at one stage was the best fielder in the world, and because he can bowl a little bit of leg spin, he sticks in that New South Wales system, even though they don't think he's ever going to play for Australia, right? Or he's never going to be great. No one really, outside of about 4 people, ever thought that Steve Smith had this ceiling, right? But because he was in that professional situation, he could still go down to the nets. He still had access to great coaches, and he could face, Hazelwood and Stark and Trent Copeland and all these sorts of guys in the nets, right? He had access to all the professionalism that you want, and then something happened, and Steve Smith becomes the best player in the world.
If Steve Smith was Pakistani, started as a leg spinner. He started as a leg spinner,
and not even a good leg spinner. Not even a good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If Steve Smith was Pakistani, right, he would have probably made a bunch of runs early in first-class cricket, right? He would have been brought into the test team early, which he was with Australia. He then would have failed. Everyone would have said he should never have played in the first place, and he was wrong. He would have then probably gone on to be someone like Fawad Alam, right? And he wouldn't have got picked for ages. And also, the reason that Fawad Alam wasn't picked is partly because the system of Pakistan is not professional enough to understand that someone needed to tell him your only chance of playing for Pakistan is to bat first drop. I'm sorry, but Misbah and Yunus exist. You don't have a choice. You're going to have to bat first drop, and you're going to have to develop your game a little bit. Steve Smith had all of that because he was in this incredible professional system. Now, his improvement is on himself, but he got to improve because he was part of this great other system. For you to be that kind of player and be successful in Pakistan right now is almost impossible unless he comes in and when he's too young and he shouldn't be there, he makes like 400s in his first 8 games. That's the only way you could be Steve Smith in Pakistan right now. Whereas actually what happened in Australia was he came in, he was terrible, right? He went back and he worked on his game. He came in again. He was terrible again, right? And then they went, okay, but the one thing that Steve Smith is really good at is he's a specialist at playing spin. So next time we go to Asia, we'll take him over. And when they got him to Asia and they saw him in the nets, they were like, oh, okay, it's not our technique. We don't know how it's going to work, but we have a spot for him. And because he was a great fielder, because he could give you some bowling, and all of those skills had been worked on, right? The difference between Wasim Akram and Steve Smith is it took Steve Smith some time to become that level of player. And that happens because of the system he was in. Mitch Marsh is another perfect example of a player who, I think Mitch Marsh would be quite honest with this, was drinking his early career away, right?
Okay.
And Australian cricket were like, you are too talented for us to get rid of you, but we are going to be really strict with you over and over again until Mitch Marsh becomes the player who essentially wins a World Cup for Australia.
Right?
Australia.
And so Mitch Marsh in a less professional structure would have disappeared. Even in the old Australian structure, right, would have disappeared. So you're talking about the best batter that Australia has had since Don Bradman, and you're talking about a guy who helped win Australia a World Cup, who is now their captain, right? They exist because of the structure. Whereas in Haris Rauf, to be successful, has to be Wasim Akram. Right? To be consistently successful, he has to be Wasim Akram. And unfortunately, the last Wasim Akram that was born in India, and his name is Jasprit Bumrah. And so you guys haven't had access to him, right? You can't just imagine that there is going to be another 16-year-old like Nazim Shah type bowler. These guys have to develop. They have to be.
Why can't you say Mohammad Amir? Mohammad Amir lost his chance, but in 2000, before 2010 or 2011, Mohammad Amir was also second. Wasim Akram, you can call him that.
Yeah, no, I think I think Mohammad Amir was probably not quite at Wasim Akram's level. And I think he was developing really, really well. But those, how many years apart is that, mate? Is that 25 years apart? So every 25 years, you're telling me that you're going to come up with a great bowler who's fully developed. Awesome. Well, I can't wait. Muhammad Amir was what, 2007, 2008? So we're only about 5 or 10 years away from the next one. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas look at the difference between that and what Australia does, right? Australia is trying to maximize each player's talent potential, and Pakistan is looking for saviors. And there's a reason I compare these two countries. It's not by accident, because Australia did this for generations. I don't know if you guys know the story about Dennis Lillee. Dennis Lillee comes on the scene, and when he's about 21, 22, he's ranked the #1 bowler in the world, right? He breaks his back, essentially, right? And Cricket Australia go, oh, well, we'll find another Dennis Lillee. As if it was that easy to find the first Dennis Lillee, right? Dennis Lillee, because of who he was, went off and fixed himself and came back with a huge chip on his shoulder. You guys may be aware of this sort of stuff in Pakistan cricket. He never really trusted Cricket Australia ever again, Dennis Lillee, because they just completely left him on his own. And when Kerry Packer came and offered the money, the first player to sign was Dennis Lillee, right? He was the first player to leave the Australian side for money, right? So Australia used to do this. And you can see all the way through. I mean, look at all the ridiculousness they did after Shane Warne, right? But Australia has now worked out that's not how it works. Players like Mike Hussey are as important to your team as was a Akram, right? Because getting a player in a professional system who keeps improving, who might be at their best at 28 or 29, if they only give you 5 or 6 years, but those 5 or 6 years are greatness, like Hussey gave you, that's 5 or 6 years of greatness. If you pick Hussey at 20 and then decide by 22 that he's busted and then you never develop him ever again, right? Like, who's the guy that played for, oh my God, is it Umar Amin?
Umar Amin.
How old was he? How old was he when he made his debut for Pakistan?
He was very, very young.
He was very young, 20,
Right?
20.
Maybe 2021.
And when was he last picked for Pakistan A?
Pakistan A. Oh, well, I don't know about the Pakistan A, but he was last picked for Pakistan like it's been.
I reckon in the last 12 months, he's been picked for Pakistan A. Right?
Pakistan A. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. What the hell happened between him being a young prodigy and him being a middle-aged man? If he was good when he was 18 or 19 or 20, good enough to be, picked for Pakistan and to go through the age group system and to play international cricket, I'm pretty sure I saw him play at Lords, right? Like, it wasn't like he was playing a Bangladesh team in development. He was at Lords, I think against Australia. He might have been in that series I was talking about, but I think he might have played against England as well at one point. How does he go from that to not being in the system forever? So two things are wrong here. You picked him on a whim based on the fact that we need a young batter who's going to be the next big star, which is wrong. Or he's a really, really talented player, and for generations you overlooked him, right? That's the two wrong ways of doing things.
They selected him and took him straight away to England, and it swings there, so discarded him quickly, and he's still playing Champions Cup.
Who would have thought that a young Pakistani batter might struggle when the ball swings? Do you know what I mean?
Everybody struggles.
And look at the Steve Smith thing. So Steve Smith plays against Pakistan in that first series. He makes runs against Danish Canaria, and Australia, I think it was Amir and Asif, were bowling really brilliantly in that series. And Australia saw him against seam bowling and was like, he's not good enough. They brought him back about a year and a half later. A really good England side he goes up against. And again, they're like, well, wait a minute. He failed against Amir and Asif in swinging conditions. He's failed against a really good England side when we threw him in, maybe when he wasn't quite ready. And the next time they take him and he averages, I don't think he made masses of runs in India, but he made a few runs in India. And they're like, so that's 3 big challenges that they gave him at different stages of his career to try and prove, because they knew he was, even though he didn't play the Australian way, they knew there was something about him, and they kept developing him, and they kept giving him chances, and they kept him around. And then he becomes Steve Smith. Umar Amin was never going to become Steve Smith, right? Let's be honest. No one is saying that. But what they didn't do is they didn't go, well, Steve Smith's going to be the next Don Bradman, so we're just going to play him in 20 or 30 tests in a row and hope that he becomes the next Don Bradman. He was in and out of the side. He was in development. That is what you need to do. Not everyone is Wasim Akram or Muhammad Amir. Most players need to learn.
They made sure he's ready for the next time.
Exactly. And that's the difference. And that's what we're talking about. And as I say, the reason I compare these two is you go through the history of Australian cricket. Like there were a lot of guys picked after Don Bradman who were supposed to be the next Don Bradman. And it's like, well, that's not going to help Australian cricket. And it didn't for a very long time. Like if you look at Neil Harvey, he comes on the back of Don Bradman. And I think Neil Harvey averages like 65 in his first 20 test matches as like 19, 20-year-old, right? The rest of his career, he has a very normal career. But he had the pressure of being the next Don Bradman because Australia were, well, we've made one Don Bradman, we'll come up with another one, right? And it's like, that is not how these things work. And you have to develop, and Australian cricket has now got to a point where it understands the role of Scott Boland, right? Scott Boland is a perfect example of someone who they spent generations in the background, and then they were like, do you know what? We think Scott Boland has got slightly better now, and we know he's a professional, and we know we can trust him. We're going to give him a couple of games to see how he goes. And if he doesn't do well, it won't be the end of the world because we're not pretending that Scott Boland is the savior. What we are hoping, though, is that Scott Boland gives us a little bit of coverage if Stark or Hazelwood or Cummins gets injured or gets tired. That's all we need Scott Boland to be. Scott Boland comes in, there's no pressure on Scott Boland, and he did really, really well. And now he's starting to fade away. Then there will be maybe Michael Nisa or someone else. That is how you build professional sporting teams. I don't know if you guys are football fans or NFL fans or basketball fans. Your best players don't usually play from the age of 20 to your age of 35. Those are the great players. Those are the legends. Normal players come in and they're in development for a little while. And maybe they're good in their early 20s. And so you know they're good, but then they get found out a little bit. So you send them off to develop and then they come back at 25 and 26. That is how you use those talent. Whereas it's all back-ended in Pakistan to be, you have to be great at 16 and you have to be fully developed. And then if you don't star, then the pressure's on you. We all know that it's already, I mean, the fact that we've already seen it turn on Babar Azam, who's the best modern day batter that we've seen from Pakistan. The fact that we've already seen it turn on Shaheen Afridi, right? It is already that pressure. Virat Kohli didn't make a run for 3 years, right? Exactly. These things happen. We've seen great players have incredible, patterns throughout their career, right? This is a normal part of being a professional athlete. But if you're not looking for a professional athlete and you're looking for the next savior, well, Babar Azam is going to disappoint you because I tell you what, sometimes he's not going to make any runs.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically they are focused on quick fixes and not looking for the long run. As you said, Maj, you said yesterday that Babar Azam made for no runs for 2 years. And if you calculate those test matches for 5 months, we didn't play any test matches. Then 6 months, we didn't play any test matches. But in the picture, in the stats, you said 2 years he haven't played any runs. He haven't made runs. And for that, you dropped him.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect example of, that sort of we're losing. So whose fault is it? Right. And you asked that question at the front. When you said, it's captains, the coaches, the selectors, whatever, everyone's looking for fault. The fault with Pakistan cricket is quite clearly in the structure of Pakistan cricket. And it comes from the magic of Wasim Akram or the 92 Corner Tigers team, right? Or the 2017 Champions Trophy team, right? We know that Pakistan can do all that sort of stuff. But we've forgotten that Pakistan cricket at its absolute best was probably in the 1980s when they were a consistent side, home and away, had a lot of role players. Go back and have a look at that team. There's a couple of big stars. There's a lot of players in that team that are not stars, right? Like Rambo, right? Like a lot of role-playing players, the kind of Pakistani Faf du Plessis type players, right? Not stars, but they get the job done. They understood what they were doing. They had obviously a little bit of magic from the fast bowlers. They had a little bit of magic from Abdul Qadir, but they also had a bunch of finger spinners who were just okay. They weren't on India's level or even maybe Sri Lanka's level of finger spin, right? They were just okay. Right. And the batting, this is before, Javed Miandad's on his decline at this point. This is before Inzi comes in. Moyo and Yunus and all those guys are way away, right? And yet it was a really good, consistent side. That is the side that isn't fetishized. The two teams that are fetishized, right, are the 2017 side that came from nowhere and the 1992 side that came from nowhere, right? Was actually, if you look back, there was a period of time in which Pakistan cricket made a lot of good decisions and picked a lot of role players and didn't chop and change madly all the time. And by the 90s, that starts to change, right? I just finished a book about the 50 greatest test batters of all time. And Syed Anwar is so close to being in that book. Like people don't understand how good Syed Anwar was.
How good
right?
he was.
He didn't play a lot. He was not picked for periods of time of which I'll still never understand. I think he played a couple of test matches, failed, if I remember correctly, and then disappears for 2 years. I mean, we're aware of that. He then gets dropped in the middle of like his good run and everything. And so he doesn't end up with a huge body of work, right? So by the 90s, we know that something has changed in Pakistan
There
cricket.
was a point in 90s, Saeed Anwar had 15 ODI centuries and Tendulkar, Lara, they were behind him.
Yeah. Oh, incredible player. Incredible player. So I do think what happens is this is why I like comparing them to Australia, because I think they're really similar. You start playing on your myth, not your reality, right? So you remember a couple of years ago, Australian cricket decided to stop sledging and stop being rude to everyone, right? And then they lost. Listen to what all the old players said. It's because they're not hard enough. They're not sledging enough. They're all soft now. This current team doesn't sledge that much, right? It's won a couple of World Cups, not sledging. It's won a World Test Championship, not sledging. This current team is considered one of the nicer teams in world cricket, right?
Yeah.
Where are all those guys telling us that we're not playing the Australian way anymore? Well, they've all gone, right? Because now this team has won a bunch of times. So you get caught up in your own myth, right? And your own nonsense. And the myth of Pakistan cricket is I'm not going to say Sakleh Mushtaq's phrase because I always butcher it, but it's that phrase, right? And it's like that is not what you want your strength to be. What you want Pakistan cricket to be is for this incredible, passionate cricket culture who play cricket their own way, right? I think that's a great thing about Pakistan cricket, right? They play cricket their own way. They've got their own style of doing things. Let's embrace that. And let's bring that into how we play our cricket. And let's make sure our fast bowlers always have great hair, right? Let's make sure, let's make sure that there is a sense of freedom in Pakistan cricket that we are always cultivating, because I think that is when Pakistan is at their best. But let us not pretend that the chaos actually makes us better players, because the chaos doesn't make us better players. It's just that sometimes we are so talented, we overcome the chaos. Let's channel the chaos into actually making things better consistently. And then we don't need to occasionally be corner tigers. We could just be a consistently good cricket team who has enough talent and also enough money, right? The cricket culture is not particularly poor in Pakistan compared to New Zealand, who have no money, right? Like, do you know what I mean? There are some cricket cultures who don't have any money at all. Pakistan has access through the PSL to some good money, and they still make a lot more money than a lot of the other smaller boards do, right? There is some money there.
Right.
Let's channel all of that into being the best Pakistan that we can be. And it goes back to the kind of baseball style of things. And I don't like changing coaches because I don't like changing coaches just because you're losing. But I do like when you have a coach and they have a really clear understanding of how they want to play, right? And so Mickey Arthur was the wrong person at the wrong time, right? For Pakistan cricket. But his overall thing, if you listen to Mickey Arthur, and we've all heard the interviews from the last couple of years when he's been involved, is what he was trying to do is make sure that there was a structure and professionalism there. That is actually what needs to happen next. And if that doesn't happen, you're still
Who is going to do that?
You're still waiting for the next.
That?
Well, here's the issue that you guys know. It's easy for me as a cricket person to say all this, right?
Yeah.
Very easy for me as a cricket person to say this. This is what you need to teach your cricketers how to field. Like, do you know what I mean? That's an easy thing for me to say. The problem is that Pakistan cricket, more so than Sri Lanka and India, more so than maybe Zimbabwe, is completely run by politics. And Pakistan politics, I'm pretty sure I'm not telling any of your listeners anything new here, but Pakistan politics, not the most consistent thing in the world and not the most trustworthy thing in the world. You wouldn't want to set your watch to Pakistan politics, right? The only way for Pakistan cricket to really go ahead is to separate completely from the political system, right? Now, who's going to be the politician who does that? I don't know.
He's sitting inside. The one who can do it, he's sitting inside.
Right. So
that guy can do it.
But he didn't though, did he? Because when he was in charge of Pakistan, he was still making silly decisions about cricket, even though it wasn't his job anymore. Right. The whole idea of copying Sheffield Shield's structure. Do you know how many people live in Australia 25 million people, right?
Yeah.
You can't copy Australia's structure. You should be coming up with a structure that fits your culture, right?
Agreed.
You can, and there are the Champions Cup. I think is actually a really interesting one because I like the idea. I was talking to Gareth Batty, Surrey's coach today, who obviously used to be Azam Mahmood's boss, right? And we were talking about that, and we were both saying that we really like the idea of the Champions Cup of being basically you can make it any format of cricket you need, and before a major tournament, you get all the best players together, right? And you play them in that format, so you get a look at everyone, you get a little bit of match practice, and if there is someone who's from the outside of the team that might make a case for themselves, you've seen them against the best players, right? That's really, really clever, right? What's not clever is only having 5 or 6 top teams in a country of what, 150 million, 180 million. I don't even know how many people are in Pakistan. It seems like a lot to me, right? It's certainly more than where I grew up, right? So what you actually need is probably, I would say 15 to 20 professional cricket teams across the country, right? Playing lower level cricket. And then when the players do really well, you pick the best 50 or 60 for the Champions Cup. That is a great system, right? I really like the idea of that system. And what it also does is it allows for the ability to have, your railways teams and your regional teams and whatever you want. But you be very clear, there is promotion and relegation in that other system, right? You have a tier 1, you have a tier 2, and have a tier 3. The railways don't get to keep a team at the top level if their team isn't any good, which means that all of those teams have to professionalize themselves to stay relevant, right? So you've got the players fighting for this Champions Cup and then the Pakistan team and everything else. That if I talk to 50 people in Pakistan cricket, like about 45 of them would be like, yeah, that makes sense, right? They might come up with tweaks. They might come up with their own version of it and everything else. No one doesn't understand kind of what has to happen, right? But how does that happen? As we just said, right? I mean, what time is it? It's 6:55 p.m. in the UK at the moment. So Pakistan's probably due a new chairman. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you a question. You are saying Champions Cup, there should be more teams. But tell me one thing, if we are
not more
blaming
teams, not more teams. Was it 4 or 5 teams that had in the Champions Cup?
Yes.
Because we had 4 to 5 teams.
Five teams.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect amount. I love that. That's a really good, because what you're doing then is you are putting all your most talented. So you know that you've got, let's say, 400 professional players in the country, right?
Okay.
And we know that these players do really well against each other at the lower levels. Great. Now we want to see them at the top level against each other. The best players from each of those regional teams end up in the Champions Cup, and you get a good idea. So instead of Fawad Alam making runs in the middle of nowhere and no selectors ever going and bothering to watch, they don't have a choice now. If Fawad Alam is making runs, they see him, and they see him against the best bowlers. Now they can make an informed decision. They might still decide they don't want him, but they can make that decision informed. And also, it means that they don't have to be in a situation where they're following 20 first-class teams or 25 first-class teams, or what's some of these setups have, right? Because they just need scouts telling them who the best 2 or 3 players from each team is and putting them all together in the Champions Cup. So that's why I think it's really good. And then the flexibility to be like, well, our next big thing is we're playing a bunch of test matches, so we're going to play that as a first-class competition. And then next time it's a T20 World Cup, we're going to play it as a T20 World Cup. Like, that flexibility actually fits into what modern cricket is. And if you look at, Sheffield Shield doesn't really help Australian cricket anymore because of the way it's split up. So when the Australian team is playing its tests, that's when the Big Bash is on, right? If you can come up with a system that is actually better and helps your best players get prepared for major series, whatever they may be, World Cups, Champions Trophies, World Test Championship, etc. I think it's that flexibility, which I think is a really, really interesting thing, which could as far as I've seen, no other cricket culture in the world has worked out that this is the best way of doing it outside of perhaps India with the Jalip Trophy.
Okay.
Unain, are you asking a question? I should ask a question.
No, I have a very important question. In 2015, they were playing 90s ODI cricket. In 2016, they were playing 2000s ODI cricket. In 2016 T20 World Cup.
Yep.
So let's revise 2021 till 2024. Are they still playing ODI cricket in T20 cricket?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the style thing from before. You know that period where Pakistan won a bunch of limited overs games in T20 cricket. So unfortunately for them, it was in between World Cups, and then they got Marcus Stoinis and Matthew Wade in the one World Cup that they probably should have won. And then the next time they went up against a better team, right? And you know, maybe Shaheen's knee caused that issue, but I still think England were a slightly better team in that situation. But that period of cricket, they didn't really play modern T20 cricket. What they did do, though, is understand exactly what they were trying to do when they went out on that field. So the batters were trying to get par or 10% above par, and the bowlers were aiming for wickets and keeping pressure on all the way through the game. That goes back to what we were saying before about coaching, right? Of like understanding what you are trying to do and playing in that way to your strengths. I think if you go back to that team and you tell them to try and just score as many runs as they can, they probably fail a lot more. And if you tell their bowlers to be maybe slightly more conservative, it wouldn't have worked. That was a blueprint that worked very well for that team. But yes, it was old fashioned. It was still the way that they were playing, the way that they were playing in that period from 2016 to 2021 was probably very similar to how Pakistan ODI teams used to play in the 90s, right? Like it was, we'll get as many runs as we'll get par runs consistently, and then Wasim and Waqar and Afridi and Mushtaq Ahmed or whoever it may be, Shoaib Akhtar will clean up and we'll get enough wickets. The problem with that is that you are putting a lot of pressure on your bowlers being gods. Yes. So it's this, right? It's the savior thing that we were talking about before.
That is why I asked that question, because in that World Cup, everybody was winning chasing.
Yeah.
So they had to go above par.
Yeah,
So
and they were a bit unlucky too, weren't they, with the toss and
made the video. You made the video about Stoinis that he played a shot and Asif Ali was 10 yards inside the rope and the ball went above him. Those were the tactical blunders, and then the Hassan Ali catch and the Shaheen over. Those were the things which were the real reason. But I think they lost that match in the first part, in the first 10 overs. In the power play, they were 48. And in the next 4 overs, they just get Babar and Rizwan. They were playing. They took 23 runs. So after 10 overs,
I think if you look at it, that World Cup, so Australia were a shambles in that World Cup. So Mitchell Marsh was dropped during that World Cup because he wasn't supposed to bat at first drop, and then he made a bunch of runs beforehand. They put him in at first drop. They were really confused about how to play T20 cricket, Australia, right? And what they did was essentially, if you look at those last 2 games, they just went, we're not playing good cricket, so we're going to swing really hard. And so if you think about it now, it's kind of what Travis Head and what Abhishek Sharma and what modern T20 cricket has become, right? Is that uber attacking version. Now, as I said, Australia did it by accident. And England were doing elements of it, although England were a little bit more structured than Australia were. So Pakistan is playing their version of cricket, which had worked for them, right? They'd won a lot of T20 games. Right? As I said, I still think they should have won that tournament. They were really unlucky not to win that tournament. And they'd done everything right. But the truth is that they probably went up against an Australia who had changed the way that T20 cricket was going to be played, certainly by Australia. And now everyone does that, right? And that's the new method. So but the thing is, when you are only trying to win the game on one side of the ball, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. And as you said, their bowlers were always going to have to bowl with the dewy ball, right? And one more wicket and they still win that game. Like they really completely bossed that game in many ways. But your point is true. They didn't push Australia as hard as they could, which meant that when Australia collapsed, it didn't actually take that long for Stoinis and Wade to catch up, right? And that's the difference.
And there were some blunders by Babar because it was his first stint of captaincy. We have to discuss that as well.
Yeah, no, they were. But I mean, I think that's a normal thing. And also, you got to understand that once you get Stoinis and Wade going that hard at you, right, and the ball is wet, you can be MS Dhoni. And it can be very hard to pull those sorts of things back, right? You're right. Tactically, I don't think they were perfect at that point. But you could make an argument that they still, for 75% of that game, dominated the game. And they lost, right? And they lost because Australia maximized 10 overs and Pakistan never maximized any of their overs, right? And that's what it comes down to, is if you are putting all your eggs in the basket of Shaheen Afridi is going to take 3 wickets early on, and Hassan Ali is going to be unplayable, and our spinners will take. When that works, you win, and when it doesn't, you might be under par, and that's what we kind of have seen from that style before. And then the other issue is I've got no problem with that style while it's working. Like I've done lots of podcasts about this before. The other issue is when their fast bowlers stopped taking as many wickets, and when Shadab Khan's groin went, and when they didn't have a good second spinner, they kept playing the same way. You can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. That would be like the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry retires and Klay Thompson gets traded, and everyone else, and Kevin Durant doesn't play for them anymore, right? And they just put 3 random guys on and go, "Can you guys shoot 43 threes attempts per game?" So you're not going to hit those threes, are you? If you just brought 3 random people out there, you need to work to your team, and there needed to be a flexibility. And I would say that as good as Pakistan was in that era, I don't think they had a great amount of flexible thinking. And again, that probably goes back to, I think Babar is that kind of a person. I'm not slating him here or anything, but I think that is Babar Azam's personality, right? He's like, I do this and it works, and I'm going to keep doing this, and that's why he's had trouble in his form dip, because he's not like a Steve Smith, right? Every year, Steve Smith be like, "Oh, really, I've had to change my batting again," and everyone else be like, "Have you? You averaged 70 last year." He's like, "Yeah, but could have averaged 75, right?" There's different thinking with those sorts of players. So I do think there was a rigidness with Pakistan, but I also understand it. It was working. And realistically, if you played back those 2 World Cups again in a row, they'd probably win one of them, right? And that's the truth. Like that, it's the same. And I said the exact same thing about India. When India kept losing, the Indian fans were losing their minds. And I was like, if you played back all of these World Cups again, India would have actually won a couple. Like sometimes sometimes shit just happens, right? And for Pakistan, it happened at the wrong time. Two major things, 3 major things really occurred to them, right? The first was that they got really good between 2016 and 2021, and there wasn't any T20 World Cups. That's not ideal. The second one was that Hassan Ali wasn't in the right position on the field. Now, that might go back to my professionalism bit, or it could have just been a mistake. Sometimes players are just in the wrong spot. And then the third thing is they finally went up against a pretty full strength England side, who were the better team than they were throughout that whole period. And realistically, England, if we've been playing a World Cup every 2 years in T20 cricket, England probably would have won a couple as well in that period, because they were brilliant. Sometimes, as I said before, shit happens.
Yeah. Okay, if we are talking about T20 cricket and World Cup, T20 World Cup, I would like to ask a question on that. In T20 World Cup 24, one of your shows, you predicted watch out players for Pakistan were Shaheen Afridi, Naseem Shah, and Iftikhar. So how do you rate them after the World Cup? And a very important part of that show was your surprise player to watch out for was Azam Khan. How can you select Azam Khan being on his physique? You cannot select him. You were talking about the fielding in the 2000, which World Cup? 2015.
All the World Cups.
And now you are watch out player is Azam Khan, we cannot cover him in any position. Wicket keeping.
So let me talk about Azam Khan.
What would you say that?
So let me talk about Azam Khan for a minute. You don't need 11 great fielding athletes in a cricket team. Okay. And if you had 11 great fielding athletes, you'd probably be shit, right? You need different things. Azam Khan is a power hitter, right? I mean, that's kind of his thing. I don't know if you guys watch baseball, but the power hitters are generally not the same kind of athletes as the guys who are good in the outfield, right? Okay. So in that situation, I think you have to cover it. I do think for a team like Pakistan, it is harder to cover that because there aren't as many plus fielders in general. So I would agree with you from that point of view. But I'm a big fan in Azam Khan and Lizelle Lee and Rakim Cornwall, right? And I don't care if they can't run a 2K time trial in the specified time, because they're built to hit sixes, right? They're built to bash the ball and hit boundaries. Prithvi Shaw hits a lot of boundaries, right? So I'm okay with that. I thought what they needed was someone who had the ability, and this goes back to the previous conversation we just had, right? I wanted them to have someone who had the ability to score at such a rate that he put pressure on the opposition with the bat, right? And I thought he had the ability to be able to do that. I thought he was in terrible form, and I only saw him in the World Cup. I didn't see him in the nets, but based on what I saw in the World Cup, if he'd been batting like that in the nets, I wouldn't have picked him, right? but I'd seen him beforehand.
Why
I
did
was
you
happy with it.
select him on basis of what? On basis of PSL or basis
CPL.
of Caribbean League? Why did you say that he is a good hit? I don't see big performances by him. Why did you select it?
Because he can put pressure back on the opposition. It's not that, it's not necessarily, and remember, when I was picking him, I didn't know that all the American pitches would require the kind of batting that they required.
Yeah,
They were doing.
Right?
they picked him for West Indies and they didn't
Actually,
even go
Jarrod, the thing is that they don't, the both of them don't agree on Azam's selection, and I am also a big fan of Azam because on that time Pakistan teams need a hard hitter on that number, and no
Yeah.
one was performing, and I think he was the right choice. But they
Exactly.
don't.
And
Both of them don't agree to me.
no, so I think that I have no issue with that. And what his record is, what he averages mid-20s with a strike rate of 150, right?
Right.
There aren't a lot of players that give you that with a second skill, right? I follow T20 cricket. I work around the leagues in the world. There just aren't many players that do that. We thought that the American pitches would be flat because that's what the ICC
Exactly.
had told us, right?
Right.
So if you go back and you have a look, I was picking players based on flat pitches and what I thought they would do very well on. Having a look at that wicket now, the people that you wanted on that wicket were Virat Kohli and Kane Williamson and Steve Smith and Babar Azam, right? Like those are the players you actually probably wanted on those. You wanted your absolute best batters because my God, those pitches were tough to bat on, right?
Exactly.
So Azam Khan comes from that. The bowlers, I thought I'd seen enough in Shaheen Afridi of recent times that I thought he was back. In fact, to be honest, his white ball stats for Pakistan over the last couple of years haven't been horrendous. I think he gets a lot of wickets at the death now rather than early on. So I think they flatter him a little bit. But I thought that he could be a very explosive bowler. Nazim Shah, you're just picking a young fast bowler because they're great. I've got no issue with that. And Iftikhar was another one who had been in very good form over and kind of rebuilt his career, right? After being a bit of a plodding player for a long time, had rebuilt his career. And again, I was assuming that we were going to have flat pitches in the USA. And what you really want is you want Azim maybe at 4 or 5, and you want Iftikhar at 6 or 7. And then that gives them the ability that if they do get stuck at the top, which they are want to do, you have that power. But that's not how that tournament played out. And as an analyst, that's what you've got to do. Like I would have, everything I just said, I think Nazim Shah is the only one I would have kept having watched that first game. So I can't remember what the first game was in New York, but the first game I saw in New York, I was like, oh, this is not the tournament I thought this was going to be at all. This is going to be very, very different. Nazim Shah, I still think would have been a good bowler on that surface and should have been a better bowler than he would have been. But Kigisa Rabada didn't bowl very well on those pitches. I think on those pitches, there's a guy called, I don't know how much you guys followed this, but there's a guy from Canada called Dylan Hetlicker, I think his name is. Big West Indian guy, but plays for Canada. Okay. And there was a game
very huge guy.
Yeah, the big dude.
Very huge guy, yeah. He's an off spinner.
Hey?
He's a batter and he also do off spin.
No. This guy's a fast bowler. Plays for Canada. You're thinking of Rakim Cornwall. No, yeah, he's not quite that soft, but he's a big. Have a look at him if you ever see Canada play. You'll see him because he's about a foot taller than everyone else from Canada, and he's just a big, strong guy. And they were playing Ireland on one of those pitches, and I think I can't remember what they were, but they were like Canada weren't favorites for this game, but they'd made about 150, 160. No, maybe it wasn't that much. Maybe 130,
130. They scored 130. Yeah. Highest on that pitch.
Yeah, and I remember straight away, I can tell you guys for a fact, I put all of my money on Canada based on Dylan Hetliger because he was the exact kind of bowler I want on that surface. Very different to someone like Shaheen. He hits the surface, and that's all you needed on that surface was, I know I'm trying to
just hit the length.
Yeah, because big, strong guys hitting the length on that kind of wicket, like Andrew Flintoff on that New York pitch, no one would have ever scored off him, right? Not a single. Morne Morkel on that pitch, you would have died. Right, you needed someone big and strong to hit that pitch, and so I didn't know any of that going in. Right, so as an analyst, I have to pivot, and so the stuff that you're talking about, I did before the tournament when I was assuming, and this is based on knowledge I got from the inside, that these pitches were going to be made for batting pitches and that they were going to be flat. So I want Iftikhar and Azim, and I want my swing bowlers and I want my fast bowlers. The minute that tournament started in America, I was like, I want 11 Dylan Hetligers, right? Like, I just want someone just coming in and just smashing the ball into the pitch over and over again. And you have to be adaptable. right? And that tournament caught Pakistan off guard a little bit. I think that's fair to say. But it also, India didn't always play particularly well in those earlier games. Like India had some moments where they weren't playing 100%. Then, if you go back and have a look at like the way that Siraj and Arshdeep were bowling early on, there was some absolute trash bowled. Who was it? South Africa in one game. No one could hit the seam off the square. And they like suddenly bring Maharaj on. And you're like, what are you doing? Just get your big men to hit the pitch. So it took everyone some time to understand that. And so again, that is what professionalism is, right? We've got to this tournament and we are planning to play a bunch of big hitters. Actually, we can't play them until we get to maybe Barbados now, right? And to get to Barbados, we're going to have to tell our bowlers to bowl a different length. We're going to have to tell our bowlers to come up with different theories on how they're going to play, right? Perfect example of this is Muhammad Amir in the game against in the Super Over, right? I understand 100% from an analytics point of view what he was trying to do. The bigger boundary was to the leg side. The smaller boundary was to the leg side from his end. He was bowling to a right-hander, so he's trying to bowl as wide as possible, angle the ball away, right? At what stage in the Super Over against the USA, right?
Okay. He was bowling wide out.
Yeah, at what stage when you've bowled 4 wides and your wicketkeeper can't catch any of them, do you stop? Right?
No.
And that is, you can come up with the best theory in the world. If I was an analyst, I would have said, hey, Mohammed, what I want you to do now is bowl really, really wide as much as possible and make sure that they can't hit the ball to the leg side, right?
Right.
Halfway through that over, you have to stop doing that. And you have to be flexible. And as we said before, is Pakistan flexible in their thinking in limited overs cricket? They're not. No. They come up with a plan and it either works and they look like a really good team, or it doesn't work, and we all sit here and we say Azam Khan is the worst thing we've ever seen in our life, right? And that is not how you should be thinking about professional cricket teams. Azam Khan was being sent in on it. What's Azam Khan's first class average? Is it like 25, 30? Like he's not Kane Williamson, is he? So the minute you saw those wickets like that, you had to think, oh, okay, maybe we have to think about this differently now. And that is what, I say World Cups are problem-solving events, right? And that's how you have to do it. And that was what India did was a perfect example of brilliant problem solving, when in previous World Cups, that's what they hadn't been doing. But in that World Cup, what India did was they problem solved all the way through, and they thought about what they were doing, and they tweaked it and they made sure that it worked, and everything went exactly the way they wanted to. The teams who didn't problem solve, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, right, really struggled. And that's what you have to be able to do.
My argument about selecting Azam was that, let's suppose he has scored 50 runs and now he's playing with a number 9 or number 10. He hits a shot, it's a 6, then he hits a shot, he needs to get back to the strike. He gets 1 and he's at the non-striker end. He can't get there. So he cannot take the twos. And one more thing.
I get you.
The Champions Cup, we just had a Champions Cup. The first match, there's a guy named Abdul Samad. He scored 25 balls, 65 runs, and at the same position, number 6. And his age is same as Azam Khan. So that comes to your point about the structure of Pakistan cricket.
Yeah, no,
definitely. Not even in the picture. He was not even in the picture.
Because no one knew about him.
No one knows about Abdul Samad.
I would say that's blaming Azam Khan for not being good, which is what Pakistani fans did, and you guys probably did on this podcast, is not helping you, right? He was picked for a specific role, and when he got there, that role didn't exist anymore, and he wasn't. There was nothing he could do to overcome that, right? That's not his fault. That's like picking a spinner when you go to India, and India put out all green tops. It's like, sorry, you can't bowl now. Okay. We're going to have to pick our seam bowler.
Right.
But to get back to your other point about the 6s and the 1s, and I'll finish off here because I've got to go now. But I'll finish off with this. You say when he's batting with the number 9 or number 10, and you're worried he might not get back for a second run, but he's just hit a 6. If he's batting with a number 9 and number 10 and he can hit 6s, I'm not too worried about whether he can get 2s. And the other thing I would say is, I'm not particularly, I would never pick a player based on how they're going to bat with a number 9 or number 10 in a T20 game, because the average number 7, I think, faces 7 balls per match or 9 balls per match in a T20 game.
Right.
I ain't worried about how he bats with the tail in that particular situation. In general, I think you can only hide a couple of Azam Khans, Rakim Cornwells, Lizelle Lees, those kind of power hitters. But, Lizelle Lee, the South African player, I was at Leicester. Leicester is, I think, one of the biggest playing surfaces in world cricket. It's a massive ground. And Lizelle Lee hit a six there in the Women's World Cup that went over the fence. No pissing about, right? Didn't go over the stupid little ladies' boundaries. It went over the fence, right? I then went to the MCG about a year later and I watched Lizelle Lee again put a ball into the MCG crowd, right?
Oh, okay. Right.
I'm not worried about whether she can run twos, mate. Do you know what I mean? There aren't many players that have that ability, and Azam Khan is one of those. Now, there are other issues within his cricket, like his wicket keeping is odd at times. Let's be honest. Like, there are some other bad wicket keepers around the world. Nicholas Pooran's wicket keeping and KL Rahul's wicket keeping. We could go in, but he offers you in a squad the ability to change your squad because you have a second wicket keeper, right? He then gives you six hitting. In a country that, let's be honest, since Shahid Afridi has not really been about the six hitting in an era that have a look at India the other day against Bangladesh.
Whoa.
Close your eyes and imagine how Pakistan could do that. They can't, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I agree.
And so you do need to push those kinds of players. But this is the thing, and I understand where you guys are coming from is you guys want them to be more flexible and you want them to attack more. But when they actually get a player who is all about attacking and has a lower batting average, you can't accept that he might not be as good. But generally, to get a player, Tim David is not like a test quality player, right? Right? And Tim David has failed a lot for Australia. But why is Tim David in that side? It's because if you get him to face 12 balls of the last 24 balls, chances are he's going to hit 7 sixes, right?
The format of the game allows him to play.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
He's not in the side to run twos, right? He's in the side to just sit there and try and smash as many sixes as possible. But I don't know. I'm going to look this up because I'm now fascinated. My guess is that Tim David,
if a person can't pass the lowest barometer of fitness, then he should not be selected for Pakistan team.
I disagree with that because when you say the lowest bit of fitness, isn't power hitting a kind of fitness in cricket? Isn't strength a fitness? So I don't know how much Azam Khan can bench press, but I know he can whack a ball, right? So if by your thinking, you wouldn't pick Mark Greatbatch or Inzamam Ul Haq, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so there, and look, don't get me wrong. I think in general, it isn't. I would never blame Baba. No, I'm going to say Baba Azam Khan. I'd never blame Azam Khan for being unfit because, as we just found out, 25 and 26-year-olds and 28-year-olds in Pakistan cricket don't know what to eat. Right. If you're listening to Shoaib Malik, they don't know what to eat. So we can't blame a 25-year-old professional, right? If he's in that situation. Now, I think we would all say, look, your dad was a cricketer and your uncle was a cricketer and you should at least understand what you need to do. But we also understand that there's different body types and everything else. In general, Pakistan cricket should be trying to get it so that there aren't players who are like that. Or if they are big like him, you want them to be big like him in a Ben Dunk way, right? Ben Dunk is a big dude, right? But he also moves around the field quite well. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And then Rakim Cornwall can't move, right? Like he's just not able to move because of the size of him. But Rakim Cornwall is has brilliant hands, right? So again, you're still maximizing other parts of it. But when you come to six hitters, I really think that, in that kind of situation, you need to be realistic about what you're talking about, which is if you want someone who regularly whacks sixes, chances are they may not be the same kind of athlete who can regularly steal twos. Like AB de Villiers and Glenn Maxwell and Joss Butler are some kinds of players. Chris Gale couldn't run a two, right? He didn't have the hamstrings to run a two. You would almost cry if he had to run a two. So are we really saying then at that point that you're not going to pick him, right? And I don't think we really mean that, right? And so what you really want to do is get yourself into the situation so that the next Azam Khan, when he comes through, has all the information and all the help and all the support he needs to make sure that he is in the right situation. But we also have to understand that cricketers have always come in different sizes, and that if their athleticism is different. So I'll go back to Rakim Cornwall again. Just put my final point. Rakim Cornwall almost quit cricket to go and play in the NFL. I don't know if you guys know this. He was asked to try out in the NFL, right? So are we really saying he's a terrible athlete? When another professional sport saw him at the age of 26 and said, "Come over, we think we can make you into an NFL player." He's not a terrible athlete. He's not a good mover, but he's not a terrible athlete. And we need to understand what the difference is. And I can tell you guys this. I used to weigh 50 kilograms more than I do now. And when I was a big boy, I hit a lot of sixes. And these days, it takes me 2 hits to hit a six. Right? Do you know what I mean? That
and your
size
bowling
behind
action resembles Mushtaq Ahmed, I believe.
Well, it used to. Then I broke my arm in 6 places. Now it probably doesn't. Now it doesn't resemble any human being. But yes. So I'm aware that bigger sizes and that weight. I mean, it's all about physics, right? That power behind the ball really does help. So do you really want a team that everyone can run a 2 but only makes par? You don't want that team. You just told me you don't want that team.
Exactly.
Right?
You and Mars won that point.
Thank you for this debate, Jarrod. At least they won't argue with me now.
One last question. It's about Babar.
On Babar Azam, yes,
Shadab.
only
Quick,
one
very
minute.
quick. I've got to go.
Very quick. Okay.
Babar, do you think Babar gave a longer rope to Shadab as a spinner, especially in ODI cricket? You just made a video on Shadab that he's a T20 spinner. He played 8 matches against India. We just play them in World Cups and Asia Cups. He played 8 ODI matches against India and he has got 5 wickets. No problem. Ish Sodhi, Adil Rashid also have similar sort of stats. But out of those 5 wickets, the 4 of those wickets were in Champions Trophy and 2018 Asia Cup. In the last 6 years, he's just got 1 wicket against India. And by the time he's bowling, he's facing Virat Kohli. And by the time he's ending his spell, he's facing Hardik Pandya. He has never ever dismissed them either in ODI or in T20. And if you come to his batting, I sent you a topic. If Pakistan cricket is a wall about to fall, where are the cracks? So if we are just talking about the cricket team, forget the selectors and chairmen or just this cricket team. So what they need to fix? I think their ability to play spin and their ability to bowl spin. Yes. Shadab, if you see most wickets in a calendar year in ODI, you'll see number 1 Shaklan Mushtaq, you'll see number 2 Shaklan Mushtaq, you'll see number 3 Saeed Ahmed. Shadab is nowhere in the picture.
In a calendar year.
And if you see his batting average is 25. And when he faces good teams like India, Australia, it turns into 15. So he's not providing. And then if you see about...
Okay, so this is really interesting. So why do you think they keep picking him then? Do you think they think he's a good guy?
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's friends
No,
with
that's not why they're picking him. Okay. Why are they picking him? It's exactly... See, this is where I think you guys in this conversation, it's really interesting. You should go back and listen to some of the questions and then some of my answers and then what you say afterwards. You've just told me that Azam Khan can't run a 2 and so you don't want him in the side. Shadab Khan can run 2s. Shadab Khan is the best fielder that Pakistan has ever produced. Right? If you're asking me why they pick him, if you're asking me why they pick him, so when Shadab Khan was a good bowler, and I think you're being a little bit unfair. Shadab Khan was a fantastic bowler until his groin went. Right? There are lots of wrist spinners in the world that have never. Shane Warne didn't have a particularly good record against India, so I'm not worried about Shadab Khan's record against India. They play wrist spin better than anyone else does. Right?
Yeah.
But Shadab Khan is a professional, like from a young age. Diet, training, weight, core, fielding, running between wickets, and everything else. Unfortunately, his main skill as a cricketer is as a leg spinner, and his groin is gone. Right now, why he's still bowling with a bad groin would be my conversation with Pakistan cricket, but you know that would have to line up behind my conversation with Shaheen Afridi's knee, right? But why they keep picking injured players and hoping that their injuries will go away? That doesn't seem to be how injuries work, right? But his main skill is that. But if you factor in what he can do and his ability to bat in the top 6, and you're right, I think he's like a Sam Curran batter, right? He has specific things that he does really well, but he's obviously not a frontline batter. In the field, he is a frontline fielder. And with the ball, when he's bowling okay, he can get you 4 overs in a T20 game, and he can get you maybe 6 overs, 7 overs in a one-day game, right? Those players are really handy because he does a bunch of different things right. So your conversation here is that the two players that are the biggest problems are the one guy who's really, really fit, right? But doesn't have any skills, and the other guy who has skills but isn't any fit, right?
Excellent answer, Jarrod. Excellent answer.
And I think this is what is the issue with Pakistan cricket, right? You are still trying to blame the players for not being perfect, right? And it's not just, I have this conversation like with Indian fans about KL Roll all the time. And they're like, he's no good, he's overrated. And it's like, well, he's just made 100 in South Africa again. Like he's not the player you thought he was going to be. And Shadab Khan is probably goes back to our thing before of he wasn't quite the player that we were promised when he was 20, right? And when we were 20, we were promised Shahid Afridi level bowling. We were promised the best fielder that Pakistan had ever had. And we were promised probably someone that by the end of his career would have been good enough to bat at number 5 or number 6, right? He's not quite that cricketer, right? And sometimes that happens. Sometimes injuries happen. Sometimes we're the ones who overinflate what this player can be, and he could never be that player. Yes. But in a culture where you don't have a lot of professional athletes who do the right thing, who turn up to training on time, who understand fielding positions, who can cut, some of his runouts. If you look at some of his runouts in world cricket, you're just like, who else in Pakistan team could even do that runout, right?
Do that, exactly.
Then you understand that is why he's there. And the reason he's there and the reason that Azam Khan are there at the same time is because Pakistan cricket realizes two things at once. They need people who can hit sixes, but they also need what we call in cricket 3-tier players, right? Or 3-tool players, I should say, right? Which is someone who can help with the field, who can help with the bat, and help with the ball. But if you go through the history of cricket, most players who are 3-tool players are usually not particularly good, right? And the reason they've got picked is because they're kind of a little bit good at all three things, right? But they're usually not that good at any other skill. And so they end up getting picked on and everything else. But what he allows you to have is flexibility in the team. There's a little bit also of the fact, and I'm just going to throw this out there, if you had a single spinner who was better than him as a specialist spinner, he might have been dropped more. Like you had a spinner that was so bad at a World Cup that he started bowling medium pace in a crucial game against India, right? That's how bad one of your spinners was, right?
Mohammad Nawaz.
Now look at the rest of the team. Where are all the great spinners? So perhaps if you had, I don't know, if you had a young Washington Sundar coming through, right? Or even maybe a young Tom Hartley coming through, you'd be like, let's just get Shadab out for a little while, right? These other guys can do roughly the same thing as him, and they're younger, and maybe they can develop in a different way. And you would do that. But you can't do that because you don't have those other players coming through at the moment. And maybe you will. Maybe that's the Champions Cup will do it. It will find those. But when it comes down to it, blaming the players for not being perfect is what most cricket fans do, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be angry at something in Pakistan cricket, I would not look at Babar Azam. I would not look at Shadab Khan. I would not look at Azam Khan. I would not look at Jason Gillespie or Gary Kirsten or Mickey Arthur. I'd be looking at who runs the game, why they run it, and why it is not as professional as other sides. And if you don't fix that, you guys can spend, and look, it's great for podcasts to moan about players, right? Like we all do it. But when it comes down to it, the things that need to be fixed is not Shadab Khan's groin. It's the person who kept saying Shadab Khan should keep playing, while quite clearly he has the groin of an 80-year-old woman who has broken her hip.
Absolutely.
There's a lot much to discuss, but hopefully we'll meet again.
No worries. I've got to head off, guys, but absolute pleasure being on with you. And you can go.
It is honor for us, and thank you very much for this much time and sharing all the knowledge with us. It was all coming like you were showering your knowledge on us, and
no worries.
Each and every answer was just perfect. And thank you.
Next time we'll do it in Urdu, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I only know one word. Benchod. I don't know what that means, so you guys will have to tell me.
That is Ben Stokes. Ben Stokes. That is
Ben Stokes. Sorry, did I say Ben Stokes? Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Sorry if I said that out loud. All right, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
तो हमारा शो आप लोग बाद में एंड कर दो।
अच्छा जी, तो ये रहा वो यहाँ आकर में बड़ा बम फाड़ के गए जैरड भैया।
यार वो सब बहुत अच्छा लगा था, बहुत खुश हो गए उसमें।
और भाई और ऐसा लग रहा है कि
हाँ करो वो
बोले ऐसा लग रहा है कि भाई ये शो जो है ना, जिस पे इतनी मेहनत हुई थी, ये शायद ये मुझे अब ऐसा लग रहा है मेरे लिए ऑर्गेनाइज हुआ है। मतलब ये जो दो बंदे बैठ के उससे आजम खान और ये बंदा शदाब के पीछे पड़े रहते थे, जैरेड जी ने बड़े जबरदस्त जवाब दिए।
देखो
यार नॉलेज यार फैसल।
और आप जो है ना, आप इस वक्त उसकी फेवर चले, आप मान चुके थे हमारी बातें,
हाँ,
आपको
तो हमारी
जवाब मिल गया था,
आप
आप
तो हमारी
पूछ
बात
गए।
नहीं नहीं नहीं, मैं तो अटका रहता था भाई आजम खान के ऊपर, मगर ये लोग तुम ये हो, तुम पता ही नहीं है, फिटनेस लेवल ही नहीं है, फलाना नहीं है, ढिमकाना नहीं है।
देखिए हम हैं क्रिकेट एंथुसियास्ट।
सही,
वो जो बंदा जो हमारे साथ था ना, वो क्रिकेट एनालिस्ट
एनालिस्ट है।
तो उसको जवाब देना आता होगा। आपकी बात का पॉइंट मैंने सवाल इसलिए रखा क्योंकि जो डिसाइड चीज नहीं हो पा रही थी
बहुत
मैंने
शुक्रिया।
decide
मैं
करा।
point
आपको ये समझना चाहिए कि यहाँ से जो मेरी आवाज आती है ना, वो बिल्कुल क्रिकेट की सही होती है, वो नॉलेज बिल्कुल सही होती है वो।
पूछने वाला था वो, मैं बोलने मौका नहीं मिला। मैं बोला धोनी ने जो बात कही थी, धोनी वाला पॉइंट था कि आपको मैं फील्डर जो है वीक नहीं खिला सकता।
हाँ एग्जैक्टली
वो मैं पॉइंट देने वाला
तो
था।
भाई वो इतना टैलेंट होना
क्योंकि
चाहिए ना,
उसके
आपके
जवाब
पास
से लग गया।
पूल है।
देखो उसके जवाब से लग गया, वो कह रहा है सबके पास सेम स्किल्स नहीं
हाँ,
होते।
नहीं हो सकते
Exactly.
वो
और जगह
पूल।
तो 3 टियर वाले प्लेयर्स होते हैं, 2
हाँ।
टियर वाले प्लेयर्स होते हैं, वो ज्यादा परफॉर्म नहीं किए तो वो हिस्ट्री होती है। मास भाई बहुत खुश
बहुत-
हैं।
मैं तो बहुत खुश हूँ भाई,
आपको मुबारक।
थैंक यू एंड आई लव यू ब्रदर।
जैरेड को बुलाया मास भाई उर्दू भी नहीं पता
जो बात इनको उर्दू में समझ में नहीं आई, शायद अंग्रेजी में समझ में आ जाए, क्योंकि अंग्रेज बैठे हुए बात कर रहे थे।
सबसे
क्या जा रहे हैं हम फॉरेन? यार अब तो रिलैक्स हुए, जैरेड ने फंसा के रखा हुआ था बातों में, इतना हम सुन रहे थे।
1.5 घंटे से ऑनलाइन है।
1.5 घंटे से यार, मगर अगर थोड़ी सी बात कर
यार
लें
उनकी
जैरेड
बड़ी
की,
बात है, हमने 45 मिनट्स की बात
बात की थी और वो 1.5 घंटे पे ले गए, और उनसे हमने वादा नहीं लिया उनसे कि भाई आपने आना है अगली दफा भी, और ये अपना अपना ज्ञान आपने देना है। मतलब मगर हुनैन क्या नॉलेज है यार,
आई न्यू इट।
मतलब कि कहाँ से क्या क्या जॉब, और उसको असल बेस तुम्हारी पता है, जो यहाँ बैठ के मैं भी कहता रहता हूँ तुमसे
मास भाई
कि असल मसला मैनेजमेंट है।
मास भाई-
सुन रहे हो तुम मेरी बात? आज इन लोगों की जो है ना पर्दाफाश हो रहा है, पता चलिए हकीकत क्या है।
भाई मास भाई, आप लोगों को याद होगा जब हम कल बात कर रहे थे, नीचे से मैंने बोला हो सकता है आप हैरान हो जाओ कि इसको पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट के बारे में वो बातें पता है जो आपको भी
तो आपको भी नहीं पता।
ये बात हुई थी।
हाँ,
बात हुई थी, ये बात
यार
हुई।
हुनैन भाई उसका, उसने कहा ना कि मैं फैन पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट, तभी तो पाकिस्तान की नॉलेज भी है, वो फैन बहुत है पाकिस्तान
ही इज
का।
अ फैन ऑफ विक्टोरियन क्रिकेट फर्स्ट,
हाँ।
देन पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट, देन ऑस्ट्रेलियन क्रिकेट,
क्रिकेट
ये उसने कहा है।
ऐसा ही है, ऐसा ही है। तो भाई बड़ा मजा आया, मैंने तो जैरेड भैया की बातें सुन के बहुत एंजॉय किया।
आज के शो से जो लोग खुश होंगे ना,
हाँ
वो होंगे सबसे ज्यादा माज भाई।
सही है।
फिर
हो गई,
फिर मोइन
क्या कह रहे?
सात बार
आज बहाल हो गई, कसम खुदा की, आज बहाल हो गई।
फिर सकलैन मुश्ताक,
नहीं देखो,
शादाब
मैं तुम्हें हुनैन,
शादाब खान सकलैन
अब
मुश्ताक।
जैसे कि मेरी बात सही होने लगी, मैं आपको जरा सा एक जवाब
अब
दूं।
आप अब ये बताएंगे अपना क्या?
अब सुने, अब आप सुने, देखिए हर टीम में जो है ना एक
वही बहुत प्यास लग रही है।
एक प्लेयर की पोजीशन
हाँ,
होती है।
हम तो
फैसल
ये
समझिए,
चाय-
सुन लो, अब बात सुनो मेरी, अब मेरी हर बात गौर से सुना करो, समझे? पानी पी रहे, चाय पी रहे, ये जागो कहाँ से जागे जब वो अगला बंदा माशाल्लाह खुद इतना बोल रहा है, वो क्योंकि यार वो जर्नलिस्ट है, वो बोलने का आपको मौका कब दे रहा है? वो आपने ये सवाल 125 बना के रखे हुए हैं,
कोई बात नहीं, रहने दो।
125 जो है ना वो आपने सवाल लिख के रखे थे, मगर मौका नहीं मिला। मगर बात ये है भाई,
जज्बात नहीं हो, शो पे हर बात ना करो।
अच्छा शो पे यार बात नहीं करते, चलो ठीक है। मगर अपने ही लोग बैठे हुए हैं सारे, कोई ऐसा वो नहीं है, हमारे अपने व्यूवर्स हैं और आने वाले हैं।
बहुत लंबा हो चुका है शो, इसको
शो लंबा हो चुका है, 1.5 घंटा हो चुका है। तो भाई अब ये है कि इंशाल्लाह
आप लोग ये
कल मुलाकात
बताएं-
होती है।
आप लोग ये बताएं कि जैरेड के साथ फिर से हमें शो करना चाहिए तो कौन से किस टॉपिक पे करना चाहिए, ये सवाल आप लोग भेजें।
हाँ।
सवाल तो हमारे पास
वो
बहुत है,
depend
बाबर
कर
के
रहा है।
बारे में मुझे इतनी बात करनी थी, जो इन्होंने आजम के अंदर घुसा दी सारी बात, मगर अच्छा हुआ वो भी
मैंने
क्लियर हो
नहीं
गया
स्टार्ट
बात।
किया, आजम फैसल को सवाल दिया तो उन्होंने
बहुत बाद में आया सवाल नहीं उसने,
मगर उसने 15 मिनट आजम पे खींच दिए यार।
उसके अलावा उसने जो इतनी बातें बाबर आजम के ऊपर शुरू में किया, शुरू में जाके आपसे सो गए थे, शुरू में बहुत
आप
बात
बहुत
किया
हो गए
उसने।
तुम्हारे।
यार नहीं, मुझे वो उस वक्त फ्लो नहीं बन रहा था।
एक इम्पोर्टेंट बात किया आखिरी में जाते हुए, उसने कहा पॉडकास्ट में बात करने के लिए बहुत अच्छा है, जब तक अमल नहीं होगा तो कुछ नहीं होगा। तो
कुछ
आप
नहीं
लोग
होगा।
मैं ऊपर,
और आपकी तोपे गलत जगह है, प्लेयर्स को बोल रहे हो जो रन कर रहे हैं क्रिकेट उनको, है ना? बस
पहले दिन से रो रहा हूँ भाई, मैनेजमेंट का मसला है, मैनेजमेंट का मसला है, मैनेजमेंट का मसला है।
लाइक करें।
और वीडियो को लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें और देखते रहें चारों इशारे। इंशाल्लाह कल फिर मिलेंगे। थैंक यू, अल्लाह हाफिज।
अल्लाह हाफिज। माज भाई को आज
बात